The Craig Foley Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible in part by Lynette's Shrimp House, located in Highland Park. It's Metro Detroit's premier destination, serving juicy fried shrimp, fish, and wings, alongside soul food sides and new additions to the menu, like turkey tacos and desserts. Located at 13548 Woodward in Highland Park, just north of the Davidson, Lynette's is open for takeaway, noon to 8 Tuesday and Thursday, noon to 10 p.m. Friday and Saturday, and noon to 5 p.m. on Sunday. Call now, get some Lynette's. Hey, greetings, everybody. Is it Friday already? If it is, it means it's time for another edition of The Week That Was on The Craig Foley Show here on Deadline Detroit, deadlinedetroit.com. Thank you so much for being with me. And I have to say, I am in a fantastic mood today. It is Friday, first of all. The sun is shining. We are about to have 60-degree weather this weekend, and I'm getting my vaccination on Tuesday, which I'm very, very happy, along with thousands of others that will be packed into Ford Field, the largest crowd at a sporting event in Michigan in the last year for sure. So anyway, it's a big deal. And as I do every week, I have a panel of wonderful guests to help us break down the big stories of the week. Of course, we always have Nancy Derringer of Deadline Detroit. Hello, Nancy.
Hey.
Alan Lengel, who is the editor and co-founder of Deadline Detroit, is with us as well.
Hello.
Saeed Khan, lecturer at Wayne State University and frequent guest, is here with us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And first-timer, John Rutherford. Of course, he is the music director for the Motor City Horns. I mean, this guy's on the road with Bob Seger and stuff all the time. But he also, perhaps more importantly to me, is the co-owner of the iconic East Side haunt, the Caju Cafe. And, of course, he is sporting the company colors today, which we appreciate. John Rutherford, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for having me. Good morning.
Absolutely. And I know you are an avid watcher of this program, so I certainly do appreciate that. And that's why, hey, there's got to be one of them, right? But I'll tell you what, I am in a good mood. There does seem to be a light at the end of the tunnel. However, it is a little bit too early to celebrate this. We are seeing an uptick in the numbers here in Michigan. Once again, we are still seeing the same infighting with the governor and the legislature over how to deal with this in terms of getting the money in place that we need to get things open safely.
If the pandemic
are we spiking the ball too early here? I think we are.
If the pandemic were Fatal Attraction, Glenn Close would be at the bottom of the bathtub, seemingly dead.
Oh, yes, just about to spring up. That's
right. Spoiler alert, she pops back out.
I know. But for somebody like you, John, I mean, whose business has been obviously impacted by this. I mean, the capacity rules are such that, you're not operating at full capacity, period. And you have to wait just a little bit longer, but it's got to be something that's just driving you nuts at this point.
Well, we just reopened on March 8th, so we're getting to the end of our second week, and it coincided with going to 50%, which is a much more reasonable number, I think, compared to being at 25%. And we're happy to be reopened. We stayed shut down once things came to a halt in November, and we didn't do carry out exclusively, and we didn't reopen at 25%. So we've waited, and we have our outside area ready to go. But the one thing I want to know is why did he get a $155,000 severance package when he left?
Who? Oh, Gordon, Robert Gordon, the health director. We're starting to see a little bit more about that, as a matter of fact. And I actually wanted to bring this out. I mean, it looks like they had a pretty significant disagreement on what the guidelines should be in terms of closures. And it sounds like Robert Gordon was on the cautious side of things. So if you think that, Gretchen Whitmer is getting a lot of heat for some of these decisions she's made on capacity and everything else, it sounds like it could have been a lot worse in terms of what was available.
I heard rumors through some restaurant and bar lobbyists that he didn't want to reopen at all.
That sounds logical to me. And he said something in this kind of oblique comment that he made. Was that in the letter to Shirky, or not to Shirky? But anyway, he said something about how reasonable people can disagree, and we had vigorous discussions, which is nice guy code for we were at each other's throats. And my guess would be he didn't want to reopen at all. That would, just because we did reopen, at least a little bit, and.
Well, that would be
my guess.
That's indicative, though, of the intense political pressure that is on everybody involved in these decisions. I mean, Whitmer is, of course, being castigated nationwide for being the shutdown governor and being harsher than other states, whereas Florida is wide open, Texas is wide open. And why can't Michigan do the same? It's because of tyranny, whatever. it sounds like she was being advised to make it a lot worse than she did. And probably because of political pressure, caved a little bit. I don't want to say she caved, but, we didn't get through this as smoothly as we could have. We've done better than other states, but it still seems that, perhaps there was a little bit more than just medical doctor's advice that went into these decisions, Alan.
I mean, no question about it. I mean, I think she keeps saying, follow the science. But clearly, I mean, if you're really just strictly following the science, we would not have, and no offense to John there, but we wouldn't have restaurants and bars open. I mean, my feeling is, let's do it right the first time so you don't have to keep redoing, which is what we've ended up doing. The problem is you can't control the whole population. Even when you're doing it right in one area, you've got a bunch of people who are not doing it right. I mean, now there's so much pressure from the parents on playing sports. And so the sports is opening up now. And that's where the big spike is among a younger group that are playing sports. It's such a tricky balancing act. In terms of I'm curious what the contract was that was he required to get that money regardless of, I mean, it's unusual if you quit that you would get that severance.
Look at the city of Detroit, and Craig knows more about it than I do, but, Duggan brought in some pretty high-powered talent from the private sector and from other cities. And I think a lot of those people are being paid very well. And generally, when you're asking somebody, could you give up your job in City X and move to the garden paradise of Detroit, Michigan, for a political job, and I may not be in office for longer than however long I'm going to be. People want a little compensation for that. They want to be paid well, and they want some kind of parachute at the end if for some reason it doesn't work out. So that would be my guess.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, you're only going to get people, particularly from private industry, if you do some comparable offers that they would get in private industry, particularly when they're a coveted, person. But still, it's government. I mean, you wonder. And then the other thing is, in terms of the non-disclosure, that's another. I mean, the optics are bad because taxpayers are paying the money. It's essentially their employees of the state, taxpayers, and taxpayers are like, well, what went on there? They're our employee.
Well, and the question is, why was it important to have the non-disclosure portion of this? I mean, because it wouldn't be the first time that somebody has agreed to, quote unquote, resign because they disagreed with their boss. I mean, that happens all the time in every industry and in every government. So why was it, though, that they were not able to disclose what they disagreed about? And if Saeed, to me, it seems like, they didn't necessarily want people to know how much of a disagreement there was within the administration on how severe they needed to be when it came to the lockdown, because that would, I guess, jar people's faith in the fact that whether or not science was indeed informing this decision.
I don't know if it's so much about that, Craig. I mean, I think in a different time and in a different place, this would have been perfectly normal. But given the fact that everything ends up within a millisecond on social media, is then exploited, is dropped into political ad campaigns, I think that we may be moving more toward this kind of governance in some quarters. I mean, if you take a look at Governor Whitmer, she's probably the closest thing we've got in elected office to the Sphinx. I mean, she just simply does not go and play the blame game, which seems to be reflexive for so many other politicians to go ahead and put the blame on big business, put the blame on political rivals. She really keeps it very close to the vest. And perhaps we've forgotten that kind of discretion, given what we see on Twitter and other social media platforms these days.
Well, what was interesting to me, speaking of Governor Whitmer and not necessarily doing what you're suggesting there, Saeed, the Republicans have done anything but that. Jim Runestad, of course, asking Dana Nessel to investigate nursing home deaths in the state of Michigan and whether or not the actions taken by the governor were responsible for the deaths of some of our senior citizens. And Dana Nessel smacked that down. I mean, that 5-page response she wrote, which we had on deadlinedetroit.com if you'd like to read it, basically she just said, this is the wrong avenue for this, one. And two, this is something that has been plaguing the Republicans for the last several lawsuits that they wanted to bring. There's a lack of evidence. to suggest that anything was done wrong. And I think Dana Nessel was right on that. Go ahead, Alan.
I think the problem is that it was approached in such a political way. I guess the question is, should we be examining our nursing homes and how things went? Yes. I think the answer is yes. I think, is it, when the Republicans come at it, as in Governor Whitmer, investigate her policies, I think her policies are clear. She was going with CDC. Nobody knew what was going on in the beginning. People were doing the best they could, and some was guessing, and some was based on educated guessing. But so I think we do need to look at the nursing homes. We do need to figure out the numbers and all that stuff. I know in New York, part of the undercounting was that they were sending people at the very end, which they were doing here. Some of the nursing home folks went to the hospital, so they weren't counted as nursing home deaths, even though they were just about to die and they went to the hospital. So the problem is, I understand Dana Nessel saying, I'm not going to play your game, but there should be some way to examine it without pointing fingers at Governor Whitmer and taking a look. Because look, some of the nursing homes didn't operate properly, didn't follow procedures, didn't have enough staff. So I think that's something we need to look at.
Well, look at where the bar is now, that even the Republicans on the national level are criticizing President Biden for being boring, for not being as public, even though he's really leaving it up to his experts to take the mic when it comes to explaining so many of these things. So clearly, people aren't going to be satisfied with the mode of being quiet and simply, I don't know, God forbid, government officials doing their jobs.
Well, hey, speaking of government officials, former government official Donald Trump, actually came out and told people to get the vaccine this week. At least he went on Fox News and he told people to get the vaccine this week, which a lot of people have been saying, look, we need your help on this one. You're the one that's talking about the beautiful shot and how it's your vaccine. Then crow about it. Tell people to get the thing and show how great it is. And he finally did this week, came out and told people to get the vaccine, but you still have a big chunk of the population that's suggesting they don't want to get it. And John,
the hell with them. The hell with them.
But that's what I want to ask John on this one, though. You own a restaurant. You want your customers to be safe, obviously, and have a clean and safe environment for them. I mean, is there going to be some point where you're going to have to say, hey, show me your vaccination card or else you're not going to be able to come in? I mean, is that something you could foresee happening someday?
I'm not sure about that one. I
mean, because masks are easy. Vaccinations are different.
Right.
Well,
I will say I'm getting my second shot soon. And, the city of Detroit's done a great job, I think, with that and allowing all bar and restaurant employees to get it. And we've had many of ours who've had their first one and ready for their second one. But as far as requiring a card, I would be surprised if it went that route. I just think there'd be too much of an uproar.
Oh, yeah, obviously there would be. I'm not suggesting it's realistic, but how much more comfortable would we all feel? I mean, it's just.
Sure.
I would. I wrote about my experience yesterday on my Facebook page, and one of my friends who lives in Indiana commented that he was working with a woman who has been yelling for weeks now, "You're not going to make me get no vaccine. If I'd quit my job if they tried to make me get a vaccine." And then she wanted to book a cruise. Okay. A cruise around the Gulf of Mexico, which apparently the cruise company requires you to have a shot before you step on board the ship. And she caved like a $2 tent. It was like, sure, okay. Don't tie it to a bucket of mussels at the Caju Cafe, but tie it to something that people really want to do, like take a vacation somewhere.
Hey, I'm not getting on a cruise till they got a norovirus vaccine.
Oh my God, I know. I wouldn't.
How about 30% off? 30% off the first drink.
Yeah, exactly.
Nancy, that was the best Terre Haute accent I've heard in a long time. For me, I'm getting my second shot a week from Monday, and I'm planning on laminating my card because that's going to be my COVID passport that I have to travel with. And as airlines are now, especially for international travel, going to be demanding it, I think it's going to be valuable. And I already made room for it in my wallet. I took out my picture of Morrissey and I've got room for the COVID card.
Well, that Morrissey picture, I'm sure he's crushed. His number one fan doesn't have his picture in his wallet anymore. It just, okay, we've got this happening and people are in a good mood because also a $1,400 stimulus check is starting to hit people's bank accounts. Not mine yet. I'm still waiting, but it's a big deal. I haven't gotten mine yet because I was late in filing my taxes last time. So anyway, long story short, I don't have mine yet, but it's coming at some point. I'm convinced of that. But this is a pretty big step. $1,400 is bigger than the first one at a time when I think a lot of people need it. And we're really looking at an experiment here, a grand experiment on the best way to distribute cash to people that need it. Direct cash payments as opposed to loopholes, tax credits, things like that. It's a fundamental change really in our democracy and a reversal of what we've been doing since the Reagan era. I'm going to be interested to see what stimulus this actually has in the economy and how much that money actually gets recycled back into it. I have a feeling it's going to be a lot.
I do too. I mean, I don't know what you're going to use yours for, but I paid a few bills.
I've got bills to pay. Yeah,
I paid a few bills, and I'm not going to go out and drop it all on mussels at the Catchy Cafe, but I am going to spend. I know that that's what it's meant for. It's like it's meant. It's not meant to be hoarded. It's meant to be spread, and that's what I'm going to do. So
well, beyond buying futures in cruise line companies, I think that the real magic of this bill is how you've got so much direct and indirect payment to the American people. I mean, unemployment benefits being extended, Medicaid, schools, municipalities, restaurants. There's so much propaganda and false information about the bill, saying that I think one meme was every American paid $14,000 in taxes and is only getting $1,400 back. They don't understand where all this money is really going. It's rather impressive, and I've read some analysts say that it's probably the last time we've seen something like this is maybe under LBJ.
Yeah. Well, and then I heard there's another miracle
trickle
somewhere in there that there is that everyone's health insurance premium is going to be limited to something like 10% of their income, of their total income. I mean
that's mind-blowing.
Yes, it really is. I mean, now that we're paying that, my husband and I mean, it's like, ooh.
Now, for anybody that was worried about creeping socialism, with the Biden administration, guess what? This is creeping socialism. But the way that most people do socialism, which is actually to take care of their citizenry in some way and make sure that healthcare doesn't bankrupt anybody. Those are good things. Those are good things. And go ahead and say.
Well, actually, the Trump plan was even more socialism because it was government intervention to corporations.
Yes.
That's
true.
That's certainly much more of a textbook definition of socialism.
Of what we like to think of as the evil socialism. We're talking Western democracy socialism here. Yes.
It's evil with the pinky.
Absolutely. But, I'm interested to see, where we are a month from now, because we are about to hit, I think, the 100 millionth person getting vaccinated. This week? Is what I heard? So that's like 40 days. 40 days ahead of schedule. You've got everybody 50 and up now, and then soon everybody by April 5th that's going to be able to get this. John, I'm fully expecting there to be some decent crowds when the weather breaks out there. And I have to ask, I mean, if it feels like things are back to normal, you've expanded your space. You added an outdoor space with all that kind of thing. That seems like that might just sort of be a permanent part of your business now. And I'm wondering if you think other restaurants are going to follow suit and make sure that they still have plenty of outdoor options and stuff like that.
It's definitely permanent. And we added about 5,000 to 6,000 square feet of outdoor space and an outdoor bar that we call the garage bar, because it's in our garage behind the cafe. And I think people's temperament for lower temperatures is 50 degrees is not a big deal anymore to be outside. Whereas, a year and a half ago, I'm gonna be inside. 50 degrees, even 45 degrees. We kept the outside going through mid-November when things shut down again, and the majority of people were outside. I would say 3/4. And
That's definitely true. I went to the tap room last Friday to meet up with some friends, and we all said the same thing. It's like this is actually, it's pleasant. You know, it wasn't very cold. You know, it was kind of keep your jacket on, and they had the heater going, and it was fine.
Right.
I mean, I think a lot of people, particularly if COVID doesn't entirely go away and a fair percentage of the population refuses to be vaccinated, I mean, that's going to be my choice. So.
Well,
to sit outdoors in all but the most horrible weather.
Well, spending more time outdoors is never a bad thing. I think that's one thing that we all have discovered. Hey, just be outside, get some sunlight. It's good. Vitamin D, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's change gears here for just a second, because we're talking a little bit about changes in government and some of the changes in approach that we're seeing from the Biden administration. I know there are some other things that he would like to get done. A giant infrastructure bill, for instance, voting rights reform. These would likely take a removal of the filibuster, and we are starting to hear hints from the Biden administration that they might be open to changing some of the rules on the filibuster. Of course, the response from Mitch McConnell was what you would expect. He threatened what he called a scorched earth approach, and he threatened to pass a bunch of bills like restrictions on abortion, defunding Planned Parenthood, and some other really unpopular things that the Republicans would pass if they retook control of the Senate. And I thought to myself, go for that. See how that works out for you. I mean,
is that different from what they do any other time that they've got,
well, they never actually pass that stuff because they don't have enough votes in their own caucus. Otherwise, these things would have been done a long time ago. But they are so unpopular that senators don't want to be on record as doing some of these things. And the only thing they've ever really been able to pass, frankly, is tax cuts. That's all they're good at doing when they actually have control of Congress. So he can threaten these sorts of things. And I think a lot of people are saying, yeah, go for it. See what happens. See how you're rewarded from your scorched earth policy here. I understand.
We're gonna burn the big tent down, man.
That's exactly it. But I'm thinking to myself, is it time for the filibuster to go, or does it still serve a purpose in certain situations?
I think it's time to go. I think the Democrats, I think Washington has been broken for so long. It's time to see what it looks like when it works, and take advantage of it. And then you'll at some point the Democrats lose power and they'll have to suffer the consequences. But I think it's time to get rid of it.
I think that when it comes to as Alan said, once upon a time, the Senate Majority Leader would still bring things up for a vote, an up and down vote. And you're finding that whether it's McConnell or even with Harry Reid, they first want to make sure that they have their own caucus in line before they even entertain bringing a particular bill. So as a result of it, I think that, as Alan said, the filibuster is just really arcane, except I do imagine that McConnell is right now crafting that potato head gender restoration bill, which is going to be at the top of his agenda.
But it's just one of those things. The filibuster now, you don't even have to actually filibuster. All you have to do is just sit there and go, I'm going to filibuster this. But, if they had to go back to the point where you actually had to stay on the floor, like Jimmy Smith, or Mr. Smith goes to Washington, you have to stay on the floor till near collapse to filibuster a bill. And you actually have to stay up there and read Green Eggs and Ham or whatever Ted Cruz would likely do. Hey, more power to you if you can stand up there for 20 hours. So at some point, you're going to have to give up that microphone.
So pick your poison, Craig. Would you rather hear Ted Cruz or Lindsey Graham for 20 hours straight?
Boy, that's why there's a power button on the television side.
This kind of goes back to what we talked about, I think, a few weeks ago, which is this idea that everything is like, it's all or nothing. It's a zero-sum game, and it's okay, we're in power. We're going to do everything we want, and screw you. And then, the pendulum swings, and then the other side goes and they spend all their time undoing your accomplishments. And it's like, how do you move forward? I mean, the thing that sucks about polarization is there's no middle, and the middle is where the work gets done. And, the filibuster was a way to kind of preserve the middle, but when there's no middle to preserve, maybe this is the kind of thing that has to happen. I don't know.
I certainly think that, if they do indeed decide to go big on infrastructure, watch for the rhetoric on that one, because they're going to be talking about your grandchildren, and grandchildren will be paying for this stuff. Well, yeah, I think we're still paying for the interstate system that my grandparents' generation built back in the 1950s. I mean, that's just the way it works. You invest for the future. You invest now for the future, create some jobs, do this kind of stuff. Like 85% of Americans agree that our infrastructure needs updating, and they think that this is good spending. And
if
and
a
the thing is,
highway overpass falls on your child, you're not going to get any grandchildren to pay for it anyway. So,
but they're already couching this in the terms of, well, they're going to have to raise taxes if they do that. And I'm thinking to myself, well, yeah, typically you do have to raise taxes if you want to build something large, something new, like, I don't know, green infrastructure. That's going to be a big deal. Better highways, new transportation systems, better water infrastructure. All of these things are incredibly dated and in need of serious updates and repairs. Yes, we should raise some taxes. But they're going to sit there and do this. Everybody says, I want that. I just don't want to pay for it. That doesn't fly. And what do we have to do to change people's minds to make them realize that typically, yes, you are going to have to raise some revenue if you want to spend money. I mean,
Michigan's one of the worst in terms of infrastructure, and we're still struggling with fixing the damn roads. I mean, it's just
struggling. I don't think we've even started on that. Really.
Yeah, they've tried. There've been some false starts, and Snyder kind of kicked it to the voters. Said, "I'm not going to vote for a tax. Let the voters vote on that." It was a disastrous proposal. And we're still struggling with it because, the Republicans don't want to be saddled with the idea that they raise taxes for anything. Yeah,
I mean, the deal is always raise them on somebody else. But I mean, I remember when I was working for another publication, and one of the UP, I think it was a state legislator, I don't remember which one, said something like, when I do town meetings, a lot of times I hear people say, what we need? We need a 4-lane highway that cuts like east to west across the Upper Peninsula. And that would be, from the bridge to, Wisconsin. What a great thing that would be. It would really boost tourism and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, okay, great. I'll push for that. What are you willing to pay for it?
Take some of that money from Detroit. They don't need it down there.
No, what they always say is cut waste. It's so ignorant because it shows, like, first of all, most people don't know, and it's okay if you don't know this. There's probably no infrastructure that is more expensive from the minute you you start the project to when you're filling the potholes as roads. I mean, they just take, they take a ton of pressure and a punishment. They're expensive to engineer and build. You got to do land acquisition, all that crap that goes into it. And then once you cut the ribbon on them, then the maintenance starts. And so people just think, well, just build a road. It's like easier said than done.
Well, it's a lot easier to clear the land. Hold on, I'll give you a second to say, but it's a lot easier to clear the land now when you just use the Jewish space laser to do it. That cuts down on a lot of the costs right off the bat.
Exactly.
It's a laser.
Right.
So there's your second Austin Power reference for the day. So today our officials are meeting with Chinese officials in Alaska. Apparently they're sort of talking smack back and forth. But look at China's infrastructure. In the last 2 generations, they have built 5,000 brand new cities. Their high-speed rail apparently is at least twice, if not 3 times faster than Amtrak at half the cost. And as Nancy was saying, that the maintenance of the railway system is far cheaper in the long run than fixing roads because, well, guess what? No potholes.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, high-speed rail is something that I would utilize. If I knew that I could get on a train and be in Florida in about 10 hours or something like that, I would be like, yep, I'm all about that. I would have no problem with that.
I would use the hell out of highway or high-speed rail, the TGV.
Yeah, very true.
Then it would be like, you're going to run that through my community and I'm going to have to maybe stop for it. It's like, that's tyranny. The usual nothing. Well, I'm sorry. I got to
the high-speed rails, though, they go by pretty fast.
Yeah, they do.
It's not like being stuck with a 300-car freight train
that then
backs up when you're halfway through.
But you also have to have, because they're so dangerous to cars and
deer.
And cars are dangerous to trains. You have to have some truly foolproof crossings too, and how many times have we seen people go around crossing gates. But
you can't be bothered to wait for a train. I mean, you see it all the time. Jeez. All right, let's move on. And this is something that we have to talk about. And it's just such a depressing story this week. This guy goes down to massage parlors in Atlanta and kills 8 people. For what reason? We're still not entirely sure. He's claiming that he was, trying to eliminate his temptations for his sex addiction. But there are a lot of people talking about whether or not, this is, anti-Asian hate crime. And I mean, there's so many different things to unpack here. It's a tragic situation all around. But, again, a situation which, you've got a nut job with a gun that just decides to go and wreak havoc on some things for whatever reason. And I'm listening to all of this and hearing, conservative media and more liberal media going after each other, talking about how they're approaching this whole thing. It's just a tragic situation. And I mean, I don't blame. Oh, go ahead, Alan.
I was going to say, it's so typical. I mean, I've covered so many of these things. Some of the, even
That's the sad part.
The national things where, and it's so typical that these people are clearly mentally ill, are going in the day of or the week of and buying the weapons, just walking in and buying the weapons. And there's something wrong with that. And it happens all the time. It happens way too much. And we're it's not going to stop. I mean, I thought with Sandy Hook, when the shootings there, when children were killed, that was really going to be an epiphany, an awakening for this country. And it wasn't. And I don't know what, and that's why, we talk about breaking the filibuster. I mean, we need to get some legislation in there, gun legislation, that doesn't take away people's guns, although there's no need for AK-47s. I'm sorry. But what
if that guy, I mean, from what I'm reading now, and I always try to keep my mouth shut for the first 24 hours just because we never know the whole situation. But from what I'm reading now, that guy was kicked out of his parents' house, who had kind of had it up to here with his weird sexual stuff. And apparently they said he was watching hours of pornography a day. He was like visiting these massage parlors, etc. And he went out and he bought a gun like that day or the next day.
I think it was that day.
Yeah. And then he used it later that day. And he was kicked out of the house on Monday and he shot those women on Tuesday. And what if he had to wait 48 hours, 48 hours, and everything could have changed his life. I mean, he might have still had, some very dark thoughts, but he also might have gotten a grip on himself instead of getting a grip on a 9mm semi-automatic. And let me just say one other thing real quick, because I was thinking about this. I'm sitting here with 4 men who are older than 21, and I'm just going to lay it out here. I have been the sex partner of a 21-year-old man, and let me just tell you, they really like to have a lot of sex. Okay. That's just that is normal. That is normal sexuality for a 21-year-old guy to like to have sex a lot. So
was this recent?
Well, yeah.
Wow, Nancy. All right.
All I'm saying is for somebody to tell a 21-year-old kid that he is a sex addict because he likes to have a lot of sex, that is, I'm just going to assume it had to have come from his church or from somebody who was in that community.
There are a lot of people that are looking into the messages that he was getting from that church. And here's the thing. Most people who sit around the house watching a lot of pornography don't leave the house. I mean, it's like, so.
Right. I mean, he might have been better advised to kind of shave off that disgusting beard thing that he had, clean himself up, learn how to talk to women, and then actually find a sex partner or girlfriend that he wouldn't have to pay for sex, give him a briefing on birth control, all that stuff, and, and turn him loose. But, that's kind of the way coupling works. But I guess not.
Well, that's a lot of ifs. If only Charles Manson had gone to a better school or his stated reasons, which I was trying to limit. I mean, all of that stuff is right out of evangelical Christianity. Right. You must take temptation out of your life. You should and if you're
touching yourself 4 or 5 times a day, well, you clearly have a problem. You're a sex addict. And it's like, no, you're a 21-year-old guy. So,
Well,
I mean, it reminds me of the Pulse nightclub murders, where again you had this pretty maladjusted guy, and what was fascinating there is, of course, they blamed it on ISIS, and what was even more fascinating is that when they asked the father, "Is your son a homosexual?" he says, "Oh no, I'd rather he be a terrorist." So clearly, as you said, I mean, something in the home life is pretty messed up, and many of these people.
Right.
Well, one of the other things that came out of this is a discussion on the way that police handled this guy. Again, you have another arrest without incident, no shooting that took place of this guy who had killed all these people. And then, of course, the press conference that happened the day after with Jay Baker, who was the public information officer for the department there, who said, he'd had a really bad day, and here we are. And Nancy, that goes back to what you said. Had there been 48 hours before he could get this, I mean, maybe that really bad day would have passed in some capacity. But, this police officer's under a lot of fire for saying, one, he had a really bad day, because that is understatement of the year. He went on a murderous rampage. I've had really bad days, never had the desire to go out and do anything like that. One, does not show a lot of sensitivity to the victims and shows way too much to the actual perpetrator of this crime. I was really sort of disgusted by this. And then you go to find out that this Officer Baker also is putting anti-Asian propaganda on his page, talking about that China virus and stuff like that, and the Kung flu, which a lot of people are suggesting could have been one of the factors leading up to this. And it just, I mean, the tone deafness sometimes. I've done PR and I've made mistakes, obviously, in some of the things that I've done, and maybe said some things inartfully. But man, that was really bad. It was just a really bad day.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I want to say about that, the fact that they arrested him without incident. I mean, they did spin him out on the freeway to get him to stop, but that doesn't bother me. I mean, this idea, and I mean,
no, he shouldn't be killed. I mean, that's the whole thing. We need
to everybody needs to fall in a hail of bullets, because that tends to happen more often to people of color. I mean, the solution to that is not to do it to the people of color, not to do it to everybody. But but that was just that. But, you just have to figure, cops are hired. They're not hired for their communication skills, but they just needed a better comms team.
But I mean, this was reflexive. I mean, this is like the cops running back into Burger King to get Dylan Roof extra ketchup because he came up a bit short in the back of the squad car. And I think that the impact that's having on people's confidence or lack thereof in law enforcement being there, or maybe more specifically being there for certain communities, is really problematic.
Yeah, it is. It is. And it's tough to see. I mean, I'm just wondering how many more incidents like this are we going to see before we decide that maybe, just maybe, we need to start thinking about time, limits, and something just to let everybody calm down a little bit, because they caught that guy outside the vice president's house just the other day carrying an AK-47 and in a high-capacity magazine. What that guy was doing, we weren't sure. We know that he was having paranoid delusions, probably suffering some PTSD is what they're suggesting, but it sounds like he's schizophrenic is what it sounds like. But they caught this guy with an AK, and he was able to get his hands on it. And his mom is the one that called and said, hey, my son just said he's going to Washington to, quote, take care of his problem. And he'd been talking about weird stuff for the past several days, and clearly going through some delusional stuff about some experiments that the Army did on him or something like that. But they caught this guy outside the vice president's residence. Fortunately, she's not there right now since it's under renovation. But he was inside the U.S. Naval Observatory property. And they caught the guy. So, I mean, and he bought that gun. Like, he's went out and bought it, said he was going to Washington. That's when his mom called the FBI and said, find this guy. Yeah. So good on the mom.
He had a good mother who was on the job there. But one other thing I want to say about this too is I've been really puzzled or intrigued by the way the national media keep referring to these businesses where the shooting happened as spas. Okay. And, I go to the Schwitz from time to time when it's open, and I think of that as a spa, but I don't think I can get sex there. And so I'd really like to put in a plug for making sure that young immigrants get the job and language training that they need to become fully functioning members of the American economy, so they don't have to end up in rub parlors giving hand jobs.
Well, hey, that's a big part of the discussion that we're having right now on immigration, because quote unquote, and the Biden administration won't say it, they won't use the word crisis, but Fox News is certainly using the word crisis at the border. We've got a number of unaccompanied minors who are finding their way across the border or trying to seek asylum in the United States, fleeing, of course, violence in places like Guatemala. And, you know, what's cracking me up about this is I was watching Fox News the other day, and they're saying these kids been, you know, as soon as Joe Biden came into office, they knew it was going to be safe to enter America, which is going to be sanctuary city once again. And then I keep seeing interviews with these kids, and they're like, "Who's Joe Biden?" I mean, they're coming here, you know, they're coming here anyway, regardless of who's in office at any given time. But the anti-immigrant rhetoric is starting to ramp up again. And Saeed, I mean, we're seeing an increase in hate crimes out there right now. There's no denying this. And it's just, we're getting to a really dangerous spot. And when you start making immigration political, as opposed to being a discussion about humanitarian crises, then we get off the rails here.
Well, let's go ahead and be honest. I mean, immigration has always been political, going all the way back to the alien acts of the 1790s, the Chinese
Sedition Acts, right?
There's always been something. I think what's really problematic these days is when a bunch of Republican congressmen show up at the border to make a case that actually who's getting through are not kids who don't know who Joe Biden is, because they could find those kids in America as well in many schools. But also that this is Iranians and Pakistanis and other ISIS people. I mean, this is something that people like Ted Cruz and all have been spinning for years now. Mike Huckabee as well, that somehow the southern border is not your Ellis Island. This is really bringing in bad people into the country. And there's simply not been a single documented case of anybody being caught. And then you hear these rumors that Border Patrol people are claiming that the Biden administration is gagging them from disclosing what the reality is on the southern border. So this is a different kind of politicization. This is now happening in civil society in complicity with government officials, with politicians.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, you hear people saying we need to close the border. We need to close the border. But I'm sorry, you know, American business does not function without immigrant labor. It just doesn't. It's built on the backs of immigrant labor and has been for a long time. You know, if you look at the rest. You look at the restaurant industry, you look at the construction industry. I mean, you look at especially the food industry in terms of the growing of food. This has been a huge part of the American economy for a long time. And while the politicians get a lot of mileage by saying we need to shut down the border and be tough on immigration, they're the people who are supporting these candidates are the very businesses that are benefiting from this cheap labor. And so there seems to be a disconnect there that people don't want to talk about.
Trump's Mar-a-Lago. There have been, you know.
Yeah, I mean the housekeeping staff and the domestics and all.
Yeah,
that.
I mean it's.
I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, which at the time in the 60s and 70s was pretty much a white town with you know a proportional amount of Black people. I mean, I don't think I ever laid eyes on a Latino person or. There were some Asians, but Latinos were just completely terra incognita to me until I learned about Northwest Ohio, you know, where the tomato fields are and the Campbell's soup plant is. And, you know, my husband grew up in Defiance, Ohio, and that's, you know, his experiences. There were the Mexican kids in his high school because they had been there for generations by then. So, yeah, you're right. I mean, if you don't have people who are willing to do the job that, you know, video game playing keep kids like the guy who shot up the massage parlor, you know, who can't keep his hands off his genitals long enough to take a job. He won't, you know, if you don't have those people who are willing to take those jobs, then you don't have a tomato industry or a lot of other things.
All right. Well, let's move on here for a second, because the surprise topic that I wanted to add, just because I've seen a couple of different stories regarding this in the last couple of days. Tesla is in a little bit of trouble. I don't want to say trouble, but there are people that are questioning whether or not it's wise to use the term autopilot for Teslas, as we've had a couple of high-profile accidents in recent days in which the cars that were on quote-unquote autopilot smashed into other vehicles, whether it's a sensor problem that they have or people just not paying attention and thinking that the cars actually can fully drive themselves. I have a feeling there's a lot of human stupidity at play here as well. But, it seems to me that maybe, just maybe, Tesla shouldn't call it autopilot. You can call it driver assist or something. You can call it whatever, but people seem to be under the impression that you can just take your hands off the wheel and take a nap for a while and just let the car drive itself. And that's not the way it goes.
If you go on their website, you'll see actually there's a thing that says a driver needs to be attentive at all times, hands on the wheel, and be ready to, take over. And as you say, I think too many people are relying on it as this magic, and we're not there yet with
clearly
with autonomous driving. I mean, the cars are doing some things. They're parking, they're parallel parking. They give you warnings when another car is too close, stuff like that. There are some very good assistance things, but people are they're relying on it too much.
You're too critical. Look, autopilot is easier to say than look, ma, no hands. But Musk himself is really into titles. He just changed his official title at Tesla to Techno King.
I saw that. That was interesting. Yeah. I mean, but John, you're obviously in a position where you have a bar / restaurant.
About his cocaine use are true then?
That would be Co-King.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. But John, you're in a situation where you've got you own a bar and autonomous vehicles are coming at some point. And but right now there's people out there that I think have a false sense of security after they've been out and had a few drinks and then get in the Tesla and say, oh, it'll just guide me home and I'll be okay. Is this something that concerns you, that you're going to have people with a false sense of security leaving your place?
Definitely, we don't want that to happen. But I was going to take it the other way and say, you know what, we could use some type of automatic robotic dishwasher. That we cannot find one right now. So if anyone needs a job, put this up. With Uber and Lyft, I think the risks. People are going to Uber and Lyft and being much more careful leaving bars and restaurants and. We always encourage that. I use it.
Yeah.
Honestly, even one or two drinks, owning a liquor license now, the liabilities that you have, and any small infraction can just turn into a colossal headache.
It threatens your business too if you screw up too much. So you're right.
And I was a little afterthought on the vaccination card thing. I was thinking as the show was going on, that would open the doors too to fake vaccination cards. So now we're going to have a guy checking for fake driver's license. We'll have to have probably another guy then check for.
That's a good point.
That'll probably happen right before you see a Tesla on the side of the road getting a sobriety test.
Speaking of that, John, real quick, I'm curious. Do you see a lot of fake IDs out there these days?
Not too much.
They're harder to fake now, I think, than they were back in my day. You just lifted up the plastic on the one corner and you could change like the 7 to a 2 or something like that, and it would work.
We also say though, the Caju Cafe is not like a teen sneak in kind of bar, is it? It's more of a mature person's bar, shall we say? Would you agree with me on that? I don't know. I like the Caju Cafe; it's great, but
yeah, of course. But it's like I said, it's iconic. I mean,
the kids want to go someplace where they can, throw their hands in the air and dance, and
right.
I mean, those drink and drown type of.
Well, he's got Techno Thursdays coming up at right?
Ooh, really? Techno Thursdays.
Kid. I kid.
Tesla.
All right. So we've got about 10 minutes left, and I want to get to this because, as somebody who's worked in downtown Detroit for a big chunk of his years, I hate to see what's happening to the Penobscot Building right now. I hear tenants in that building complaining constantly about the lack of maintenance, the fact that there are bugs in the building. The elevators break all the time. They had a fire, or what they thought was a fire the other day. They've had a number of incidents with people getting stuck in the elevators. And just frankly, the building is not getting the love that it deserves for how iconic and beautiful as it is. And of course, the owners don't really seem to want to invest any money in that building, unlike a lot of other downtown landlords these days. This is the Penobscot Building, as far as I'm concerned, is Detroit's building. The Renaissance Center, of course, is more noticeable, but the Penobscot's a gorgeous thing, and it needs to be fixed up. This is bothering me. And I was excited to see Cranes take the stand that they did. Sell the place, get out to somebody who's actually going to take care of it.
It's a shanda, but
yes,
I think one of the problems right now is that the future of office buildings in downtown Detroit, there's an uncertainty there. I mean, had it been pre-pandemic and all the stuff was happening, in a minute, somebody would come by and snap it up for some reasonable price or a price that was satisfactory to the owners. But now, if somebody's going to buy it, they're going to, buy it at dirt cheap because, at least for a year or two, we're not going to know where the office buildings are going.
If I could indulge in some very rare for me optimism, let me just say that I think the office space environment is going to change profoundly as a result of this pandemic. However, I don't think everybody is going to want to work at home forever. I mean, there is something to be said for the camaraderie you get from being around your colleagues. I really miss you guys, coming down to the office and
lunch,
exactly, lunch and talking to Craig about everything because he knows about everything. But I read that story, I think it was in the news a few day or two ago, about what Ford is going to do. And they're talking about this hybrid approach, where nobody's going to have an assigned desk, but they're going to have kind of like a pod of desks, a pool of desks. And I think they're calling it WeFlex or something like that. And that's, I think that is what at least a certain segment of the white collar economy may well move toward. It's kind of like, okay, you be in the office on Monday and Friday, or say Tuesday and Thursday or whatever, so that we can network and talk and have, there's a truism that if you want people to be productive, let them work at home. If you want them to be creative, they kind of come to the office because that's how creativity works.
But I agree with you. I agree with you. And I frankly, I would love to have spent some time in an office, but I have been enjoying my little basement studio because it's amazing how much stuff I can get done when I'm down here by myself.
Productivity.
But part of the problem though is that
getting back to the Penobscot though, what I'm saying is if that place needs to essentially be gutted, this is the time to do it. Go in there and knock down some walls and put in some more modern office arrangements. I'd
like to see it. I mean, like I said, the building, I think it's too much a valuable part of Detroit history to let it rot the way that it has. I mean, because look, the last thing we want to see is another downtown skyscraper that is not being paid attention to. We had enough of that. And we lost a lot of iconic buildings along the way, which Book Cadillac may be going through foreclosure. Somebody will buy that thing, but we shall see. But anyway, getting back to what you were saying about co-working space, though, one of the problems is there's a lot of bosses, frankly, that just don't trust their workers to get the work done when they're not looking over their shoulder every 5 minutes. So I think that the resurgence in office space may be a little bit more than people think. This may not be as permanent a change as we think because there are a lot of companies that frankly just don't trust their employees.
Yeah, there are. It's like, and it's like
Deadline Detroit has cameras in everyone's home.
You're looking at it right now. So
get used to wearing hard pants again.
Yeah.
Alan, you gotta channel your inner Lundberg from Office Space and just be there.
I'm going to need you to come in on Saturday.
Yeah.
One thing I'm concerned about is if the office building, if they do come back, the sweatpant industry may decline.
Yeah. Then we'll have to have a subsidy, probably. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, sweatpants. The one pair of pants that are named for sweatpants, and I've never once sweated in my sweatpants because I just wear them to lay on the couch. I mean, it's not like I'm running in these things or anything like that. Come on.
Do you remember the first woman who snuck into the Boston Marathon in the 1970s? Catherine somebody or other? I've seen photograph. There's a famous photograph of some race official trying to physically grab her and yank her off. Yeah, okay. She's wearing what used to be called a sweatsuit, which is a sweatshirt and sweatpants. And I think she did that partly to kind of camouflage her body because she had her hair tied up in a cap. But I think also she didn't draw any extra attention running a marathon in sweatpants. So once upon a time, those were considered like gym clothes.
I think
the elder
Rocky
group, I feel like.
wasn't it, Nancy?
What?
The guy who grabbed her, wasn't that Tom Izzo? Way too soon.
What a nightmare!
Oh.
I thought they're going into the locker room halftime. They're ahead by 11. Great, and you see Tom Izzo just blowing up and trying to grab the player, and I thought, this is bad. This is a recipe for disaster.
That's Woody Hayes behavior.
And it was. I mean,
Well, the players were yelling at each other first, and I think he was trying to, make sure that got knocked off. But anyway,
the overtime was horrible.
Yeah, it was not good, and they had a shot at the end, and just couldn't get it done. Hey, we shall see. I think Michigan plays tomorrow, so that should be fun to watch and all that good stuff. Tournament time. All right, hey, we got 5 minutes left. It is time to think about doing something else on this program, something that we like to do on this program.
And now it's time for Deadline Detroit's nominees for Schmuck of the Week.
Schmuck of the Week time, and plenty of nominees this week. I am not going to make the new guy go first. I'm going to let him see how other people handle this before we put him into the mix. So who wants to volunteer to go first this time? Nancy Derringer would like to go first.
Yes, and I have to make this short because my Schmuck of the Week is the survivors of Andreas Apostolopoulos. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Who is the recently deceased owner of the Penobscot Building. And according to that, for all the reasons that we talked about just a couple of minutes ago, and according to that Crane story, they bought that building in 2012 for $5 million, which is a total nickel bargain, put nothing into it. They were offered 70 as recently as just within the last year, and turned it down because they want $100 million for that thing. That's so insane. Assuming that the evil bad blood runs in the family, I'm going to give it to those people. So there you go.
All right. Who wants to go second here? Shall I?
I'll go.
Go ahead.
All right, John, go ahead.
Are we allowed to select?
Swearing is... Yes, absolutely. I'd be interested to hear your argument for this one.
So I just thought with my background, being a musician, I would stick in the music industry. There's a number of people you could go with, but the James Levine, former music director of the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra, passed away within the last week. So I think he makes it within the time frame of this week. And I was shocked at how many people were praising him after his decades now of scandals, predator,
sexual harasser, right?
Sexual harasser,
a bad one.
Yeah, and
here's the weird thing. I was looking at my collection of CDs, which I have behind me right here. I'd show you a bunch of them. I have a lot of classical music CDs, and I was surprised at how many of them were conducted. The orchestra that's on this recording were conducted by him, and how many different things that he did. I mean, he was obviously such a huge figure in the classical world, and I was a little heartbroken when I learned that about him too, because that's not the place where you expect to see this kind of stuff. We just assume that the Yo-Yo Ma's and the James Levines of the world are just wonderful people. Yo-Yo Ma turns out actually is a pretty good guy. But that was a bit shocking. Yes, I would agree. And John,
Leonard Bernstein was quite a boy chaser. Friend of mine was at IU when he did like a year-long residency there, and said he was notorious for going after young male students. So
wow,
definitely.
See, who knew?
And I want to throw in the Metropolitan Orchestra management as well, who has not paid their orchestra in the last year. They haven't tried to do any concerts. And I will note that Detroit Symphony actually is, I would say, one of the leading orchestras in the world right now to have concerts streaming. I think they just started a small amount of people in the audience this week. But the band has not paid their musicians or done anything for their musicians.
Well, John, I gotta say, I mean, you had the worst of both worlds. You're a musician, a touring musician, and a restaurant owner. It's been a fun year for you, I guarantee you.
I think honestly, I made more money when I was 16 years old than I have this past year.
Ouch.
Just one quick little thing. Did you know? I had to move here to learn this? Did you know how Francis Ford Coppola got his middle name?
No.
No.
You don't know this? Okay. Carmine Coppola, who is Francis Ford Coppola's father, actually played with the DSO when Francis was born. And I believe it was either still during or right after the Depression. And apparently the Ford Motor Company was able to keep the DSO afloat during the worst of the Depression so that Carmine could play and earn, and he paid them back by giving his son the middle name. So there you go.
There you go. I knew he was from Detroit, or was like originally from here. But
yeah, right. So they have a history of taking care of people. So.
All right, I'm going to go next here. I am going to give my schmuck of the week to a group of people, and this would be the Tennessee legislature. Now, here's the backstory here. The Tennessee Historical Commission voted last week by a vote of 25-1, and I don't know who the one was, but to remove a bust in the state capital of Nathan Bedford Forrest. Now, Nathan Bedford Forrest is a Confederate general, but more than that, he's a racist. He's the first Grand Wizard ever of the Ku Klux Klan. The Tennessee legislature still has this guy's bust in the Capitol. So the Historical Commission voted 25-1 last week to remove the bust. So what does the legislature do in response? They pass a bill that basically eliminates that commission, and they get to reappoint different people in the place because they're upset that Nathan Bedford Forrest, the first Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, is not going to be commemorated in the state capitol. I'm sorry, the South, everybody in the South, if you want us to think that it is indeed the new South and that things are better down there, quit elevating these people to these mythical levels. They're traitors and racists. These are not the people that you want to suggest are your heroes or are an important part of your heritage. Nathan Bedford Forrest was an unapologetic racist till the day he died and does not deserve your praise.
There's a lot. He was considered quite the badass, though, as a soldier. And
well, they lost, didn't they?
Yeah, they did lose. Yeah, you're right. But isn't he the guy who either jumped up on somebody's horse and used him as a shield, or grabbed a wounded guy off the battlefield onto his horse? I forget the story. It's in the Shelby Foote.
And I think he's also the subject of that weird statue that guy has on his own private property down there. The weird madman on the horse statue that's on the side of the freeway outside of Nashville. Yeah, that's it. So anyway, those are my schmucks of the week. The Tennessee legislature, which actually allowed that to happen. All right, Saeed Khan, who do you got?
Sure. Okay. My runner-up is the Texas Rangers because they are having 100% capacity for their home opener, and then they're going to socially distance the rest of their games.
Can Governor Abbott throw out the first ball, please?
But the real schmuck of the week is, again, from Texas, Congressman Chip Roy, also known as Chipper Roy. He, in the face of congressional remarks, many of them being made by Asian American congresspeople, clearly traumatized, to try to get to the bottom of this kind of violence, doubles down first by making a reference to lynching and how that's a kind of a old Texas way of dealing with things, and then doubled down on his right to free speech to call it communist China, the China virus, and any number of the other tropes, which almost invariably had something to do with the rise of Asian American or anti-Asian American violence in the United States.
Yeah, somebody went up and punched an 80-year-old Chinese woman in the face, Chinese American woman in California the other day. And the great thing was the lady whacked him back with a piece of wood that she found and knocked him out. And they arrested the guy. So it was good. Well, yeah, she's like, the guy just came up and punched me. So she whacked him in the head with a piece of wood. I love to see that. All right, Ellen Langle, schmuck of the week.
I've got a couple things. My main one is Senator Rand Paul, who was
good yesterday,
toe to toe with Dr. Fauci. I'm sorry, I love Dr. Fauci. I think he's a hero. I mean, yes, he has known. He's not all knowing about everything, but he's done a pretty good job of guiding this country through this pandemic and trying to be as honest as possible. And Rand Paul was just dogging him about saying the mask thing is theatrics. You've had the shot. Why are you, doubling up and blah, blah, blah. And Fauci, who I understand from somebody who knows him, says he's a pretty tough guy. he doesn't roll over easily. And I mean, we've seen that anyways. And he pushed back, and good for him. The other thing is the 12 Republicans who refused to endorse the laudatory resolution, whatever, for the Capitol Police and others who helped protect the Capitol. And, it's sort of an all-star lineup of the assholes of all assholes. You've got Matt Gaetz, you got Marjorie Taylor Greene, and you got Louis Gohmert, whatever. And, I mean, just it's sort of the leftovers from, the Trump. I mean, they were there. Some of them have been there for a while, but they carry on the Trump tradition.
Well, honorable mention to Marjorie Taylor Greene, who came out the other day and said that, I wasn't talking about Jewish space lasers. I was just talking about space lasers. I didn't know the Rothschilds were Jewish. That's what she went on to say. So not understanding the anti-Semitic roots of the whole Rothschild conspiracy. But she's like, well, no, I never said they were Jewish space lasers. But she still was doubling down on the fact that there were space lasers.
She had to learn that the Rothschilds were Jewish. So,
yeah, that was good.
Yeah.
And the other one is somebody who's a frequent subject of Schmuck of the Week that I wanted to give an honorable mention to is Ron Johnson of Wisconsin. For coming out the other day and saying that if the protesters would have been Black Lives Matter people instead of the patriots who love the country, he would have been scared. But he wasn't scared because there were white people at the Capitol and not black people. And then, of course, he's saying, well, I didn't really mean it that way, but there's not a lot of ways that one can come out, Ron Johnson of Wisconsin.
No.
So honorable mention for Ron Johnson. He's rapidly approaching, trophy status. We may have to
Might
start
replace
calling
him.
this the Trump Johnson Schmuck of the Week award.
The Don Jr. Miss Congeniality Schmuck of the Week trophy.
Oh, I kind of like that. We'll come up with some names for next week for these alternative titles we could come up with, everybody. All right. We do have to wrap it up. We've been going a little bit too long here, but I want to thank everybody for being here today. Nancy and Alan from Deadline Detroit, we always appreciate your contributions to this. Thank you so much. Saeed, we will talk again soon, sir. I appreciate it. And John Rutherford, nice job, first timer. Appreciate it very much. And we will be out to see you soon as the weather changes. I need to see that outdoor patio and some live music, I hope, is in my near future. In the meantime, everybody, go out, get vaccinated, go to Lynette's Shrimp House. Enjoy them. They sponsor this program. They make great stuff. Go to deadlinedetroit.com. Become a member. deadlinedetroit.com/membership. Keep this little operation going strong. We do appreciate it. And get your vaccination. But until you do,
Stay home safely.
The Craig Foley Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible in part by Lynette's Shrimp House, located in Highland Park. It's Metro Detroit's premier destination, serving juicy fried shrimp, fish, and wings alongside soul food sides and new additions to the menu like turkey tacos and desserts. Located at 13548 Woodward in Highland Park, just north of the Davidson, Lynette's is open for takeaway noon to 8 Tuesday and Thursday, noon to 10 p.m. Friday and Saturday, and noon to 5 p.m. on Sunday. Call now, get some Lynette's.